3 years to the day since Britain whispered its last goodbye, the palace lights are softer, the memories sharper, and one short caption from a son to his mother carries more weight than 1,000 speeches. Remembering Queen Elizabeth II, 1926 to 2022. No flourish. No flourish needed. If you're here for this kind of measured, grown-up royal analysis, less noise, more meaning, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the next quiet turning of the crown. Grief has its own calendar. For most families it's a photograph on the mantel and a chair left empty at Sunday lunch. For this family it's a wreath in St. George's Chapel, the hush of the quadrangle, a nation that still drops its voice when it says her name. Elizabeth II anchored a complicated century with an uncomplicated promise: I will be there. She kept it for 70 years. Constancy is the reason her reign sits so cleanly in our minds. No politics, no posture, just the discipline of neutrality in public and the discipline of kindness in private. She made the institution look effortless by choosing, relentlessly, to be the least interesting person in the room when the Constitution required it. Which is why the next chapter has fascinated so many of you. Charles III did not arrive as a blank page. He arrived with a margin full of notes in a hand the press nicknamed the Black Spider. Long before net zero lived on ministerial letterheads, he was out in fields talking about soil, hedgerows, floodplains, crop rotation, in meeting rooms warning that the best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago and the second best time is now. He visited farms, funded pilot schemes, convened scientists and, yes, wrote to ministers. To some it felt like conscience, to others, interference. Both feelings can be true at once. Inside the family, the conversation was always quieter than the headlines. Courtiers worried, occasionally, that the Prince of Wales was getting ahead of his skis, the elegant way palace old hands say, "You're right about the destination, but mind the gradient." The late Queen's guidance, distilled by those who knew her best, was even simpler: don't write to ministers. Not because the subjects were unworthy, but because the sovereign's most potent tool is silence. When a monarch speaks, even privately, the room stops being level. Elizabeth II understood that gravity better than anyone and used it sparingly. It protected her. More importantly, it protected the crown. And yet, this matters: the environmental record we now take for granted did not grow in thin air. Charles's early insistence on organic farming sounded eccentric in the 1980s, it is policy orthodoxy now. His advocacy for conservation, traditional building, urban green space, and nature-based solutions wasn't fashionable when he began, it is mainstream today. You can believe, as many sensible people do, that letters to ministers crossed a line, and still acknowledge that the line itself shifted because someone kept pointing to it. The puzzle of his reign is how to carry that energy without tipping the scales. So far, the adjustment has been deliberate. The campaigner became a convener. The king has not abandoned the subjects that defined his life, he has changed the verbs. Less argue, more gather. Less pressure, more presence. You see it in the cadence of his diary: summits where he hosts, not harangues, receptions where he lends spotlight, not opinion, speeches that frame urgency as duty, not party. At garden receptions he now asks the question and lets the scientist answer it into every microphone. It is a subtle shift, but constitutional monarchy is built out of subtleties. Remember Bagehot's old distinction between the dignified and the efficient parts of the Constitution? Modern soft power lets the dignified do quiet work the efficient cannot. A state banquet seating chart that places rivals shoulder to shoulder, a palace roundtable that coaxes business, civil society, and government into the same sentence, a royal patronage. That makes a small, unfashionable project suddenly bankable. None of those moves looks dramatic on the evening news, but over a decade they alter what is possible. That is the register Charles has learned to play, the note you feel more than hear. There's a Commonwealth dimension, too, and it's often missed. The Crown's network isn't a voting bloc, it's a conversation. Under Elizabeth II, continuity was the gift. Under Charles III, convening may be the contribution, drawing ministers, indigenous leaders, farmers, and financiers into rooms that do not ordinarily exist, so a mangrove or a peat bog becomes not just a habitat but an asset class worth protecting. You can dislike the jargon and still admire the result: nature left standing because spreadsheets now see its value. The contrast with his mother is not a criticism of either. Different temperaments, different ages, the same job. Elizabeth's method was to efface the self so the role could shine. Charles's is to harness a lifetime's expertise and then padlock the door marked policy. Both approaches are in service to the same end, an institution that endures by refusing to be dragged into the day-to-day brawl. If you want a litmus test, watch what happens when the headlines get hot. Under this king, the palace still answers with schedule, not statement. That's not timidity, that's the Constitution at work. There is also the human thread. A son marks his mother's anniversary with a line and a photograph. A country remembers the morning its breath caught in its throat. A family that has never been ordinary does the most ordinary thing in the world and misses someone. In that space, the arguments about advocacy look smaller. We can, at the same time, cherish the serenity of the late Queen and accept that her heir was shaped by different urgencies, the oil shocks and river die-offs of the 1970s, the farm crises of the 1980s, the early climate warnings of the 1990s. His worldview isn't a hobby, it's the biography of his generation in public life. Those black ink letters, the ones that made civil servants shift in their chairs, are artifacts of that biography. They also taught an important lesson that has clearly been absorbed. When you become sovereign, you trade the freedom to lobby for the power to host. It is not a lesser power. Ask any diplomat which moves more policy over 10 years, a pointed memo, or a palace reception that binds an awkward coalition with soft glue. The crown's soft power is soft only in texture. In effect, it is granite. Zoom in another click and you see how the family system supports that balance. The Prince and Princess of Wales keep working at human height early years, mental health, earthshot, the kind of trestle table projects that make national policy feel local. The Princess Royal remains the metronome of duty. The courtiers, those unfashionable professionals, translate grand themes into line-by-line diaries that keep the sovereign away from the tripwires. It's not glamorous, but neither is the keel that stops a ship from capsizing. So where does it leave us? With a king who, on this anniversary, showed he understands that the most eloquent thing he can do is sometimes to say very little. With a memory of a queen who made silence look like strength rather than absence. With an institution that has navigated the handover without losing its balance, the late sovereign honored, the current one restrained, the heir and his wife building patiently at human height service without fuss. Continuity isn't the enemy of change, it's the condition that makes change safe. The monarchy survives because it keeps scale. It knows when to fill the frame and when to step back so the nation can see itself. On a day like this, the frame is full enough, a caption, a date, a reign that steadied millions. The debates about advocacy and letters and lines are real and worth having, but they are footnotes to a truth that carries us from one generation to the next. The work goes on, but it goes on within guardrails the late Queen built and her son respects. If that balance matters to you, if you'd rather your royal news arrive with a clear head and a steady voice, click like, share this with the one friend who always reads to the end, and subscribe. Then tell me, below, where you stand on the question at the heart of today's story. Did the king's early activism help move the country to a better place, or did it risk the very neutrality that makes the crown useful? And has he found the right register now? Your comments make these conversations richer. Thanks for watching, and for keeping the tone as thoughtful as the subject deserves.